If you look carefully at the financial trajectory of most Americans, you'll find a disturbing pattern. People who earn decent salaries, work for decades, and follow what they consider to be common financial sense reach age 65 with much less money than they should have. It's not a matter of luck. It's not because they didn't work hard enough. It's because throughout their lives, they made 5 types of purchases that seem logical at the moment, but systematically destroy the ability to build real wealth. History is an excellent teacher. And it shows us that the difference between those who retire comfortably and those who struggle financially is not in the amount of money they earned, but in what they chose to do with that money. Today, I'm going to show you the 5 types of purchases that prevent people from retiring wealthy. These aren't just opinions. These are patterns that have repeated for decades based on fundamental principles of how money really works. If you understand the incentives behind these purchases, you understand why they are traps. And more importantly, you can avoid them. Over the last 50 years, the American economy has undergone profound transformations. We saw the end of the gold standard in 1971, witnessed brutal inflationary cycles in the 70 seconds, experienced speculative bubbles in the 80 seconds, 90 seconds, 2000s, and 2010 seconds. Throughout this entire period, one thing remained constant. Most people made financial decisions based on short-term emotions, not long-term principles. This is not their fault. The financial system was structured in a way that encourages exactly these destructive behaviors. Banks profit when you go into debt. Companies profit when you consume impulsively. The government profits when you spend instead of save. If you understand this dynamic, you'll begin to see why certain purchases are promoted so aggressively in our culture. It's not a prediction, it's a logical consequence. When incentives are aligned against you, your natural decisions tend to harm your financial future. The good news is that once you understand the pattern, you can protect yourself from it. Before revealing the 5 destructive purchases, you need to understand a fundamental principle that governs all wealth building, the mathematics of time. I'll use a simple metaphor. Imagine you have 2 seeds. One you plant today, the other you keep in a drawer for 10 years and only then plant it. After 30 years, which tree will be bigger? The first one, obviously, not just a little bigger, but exponentially bigger. The same thing happens with money. Every dollar you don't invest today is a tree that will never be planted. Now, imagine that instead of keeping the seed in the drawer, you ate it. You not only lost the opportunity to plant it, but consumed the very potential for growth. This is exactly what happens when you make certain purchases. You're not just spending money, you're consuming your financial future. The difference between a person who retires rich and one who retires poor is not what they earned, it's what they avoided buying. The first purchase that destroys retirements is the new car. I'm not talking about transportation. You need to get around. I'm talking about the decision to buy new cars instead of reliable used ones. If you look carefully, you'll see that a new car loses between 20% and 30% of its value the moment you drive it off the lot. Not in a month, not in a year, the moment. This means if you buy a $30,000 car, you just lost between $6,000 and $9,000 in a matter of minutes. Now, let's think in terms of time. If you invest that $9,000 at 7% per year, in 30 years, it becomes approximately $68,000. But the story gets worse. Most people finance new cars. This means they not only lose value to depreciation, but pay interest on an asset that's depreciating. It's like paying someone to burn your money more slowly. Imagine a country where everyone decides to buy new finance cars every 5 years. What happens to national wealth over 3 decades? It's systematically transferred from families to financial institutions and automakers. It's not a moral issue. It's pure mathematics. The alternative is simple. Buy reliable used cars, preferably with cash or minimal financing. Use them until they no longer serve you. Invest the difference. A 5-year-old car can serve you for an additional 10 or 15 years with proper maintenance. During this period, the money you didn't spend on new cars is growing exponentially. This single decision can represent the difference between retiring with $300,000 or $800,000 in your account. The second destructive purchase is a house bigger than you actually need. Let me be clear. Owning a home can be a smart decision depending on circumstances. I'm talking about the American tendency to buy the biggest house the bank approves, not the smallest house that meets your needs. I'll share an observation I've made over the years. Rich people live in smaller houses than they could afford. Poor people live in bigger houses than they should afford. Why does this happen? Because the house is seen as a status symbol, not as a financial tool. If you buy a house that costs $400,000 when you could buy one for $250,000 that perfectly meets your needs, you're not just paying $150,000 more, you're paying higher interest for 30 years, higher property taxes for decades, higher insurance annually, higher maintenance costs constantly, and higher energy bills monthly. When you add up all these costs over 30 years, the difference isn't $150,000, it's close to $500,000. Now imagine investing that difference. Not just the initial $150,000, but the additional $1,200 you paid monthly for decades. In 30 years, the financial difference between these two decisions can reach over $1 million. You're literally paying $1 million to have extra rooms you rarely use in a bigger yard that forces you to work on weekends. It doesn't make economic sense. It makes emotional sense, but the math is relentless. The house should be a comfortable place where you live, not an investment or status symbol. Real investments are elsewhere. The third destructive purchase is expensive brand name clothing and accessories. I'm talking about paying $200 for a shirt that costs $20 to produce simply because it has a specific logo. I'll use a metaphor I like. Imagine two identical people wearing identical clothes. One pays $50 for the outfit, the other pays $300. Which one is smarter? Which one will look richer in 30 years? The answer is obvious, but our behavior often ignores this logic. If you look carefully at truly wealthy people, you'll see they often wear simple, quality clothing. Warren Buffett wears suits that cost less than what many people spend on sneakers. Why? Because they understand that real value isn't in the appearance you project today, but in the financial freedom you build over time. I'll give you a concrete example. Imagine two 5-year-olds with identical salaries. One spends $200 per month on brand clothing. The other spends $50 on quality clothes without brands and invests the $150 difference. In 40 years, assuming a 7% annual return, the difference between them will be approximately $400,000. This means the person who bought brand clothing paid $400,000 to have logos on their clothes for 4 decades. It's what I call the vanity tax. You pay an astronomical amount for other people to see that you can afford expensive things. Ironically, people who can actually afford these things rarely care about showing it through clothing. The guidance is simple. Buy quality clothes for the lowest price possible. Invest the difference. In 30 years, you'll have enough money to buy the entire company that makes the brand clothes if you want. The fourth destructive purchase is cutting-edge electronics. I'm talking about replacing phones, computers, televisions, and other devices long before they stop working, simply because newer versions are available. Let me share an observation. Technology evolves exponentially, but our real needs evolve linearly. A phone from 3 years ago still makes calls, sends messages, and accesses the internet perfectly. But tech companies have created a culture where having an old phone is seen as a sign of failure. It's brilliant psychological manipulation. They've turned durable products into temporary status symbols. If you buy a new iPhone every 2 years for $1,000, you're spending $500 per year on phones. If instead you buy a used iPhone every 4 years for $300, you're spending $75 per year. The difference is $425 annually. invested at 7% per year for 40 years, this results in more than $85,000. You're paying $85,000 to have slightly newer phones throughout your life. The same principle applies to all electronics: televisions, computers, tablets, sound equipment. The right question isn't, can I afford this? The right question is, do I really need this, or am I being manipulated by marketing? In most cases, you'll discover your current devices do 90% of what you need. The last 10% costs 300% more and offers minimal real value. Use your electronics until they stop working adequately. When you need to replace them, buy models from 1 or 2 years ago, which offer almost the same functionality for a fraction of the price. Invest the money you save. In a few decades, you'll have bought financial freedom instead of slightly faster gadgets. The fifth and perhaps most subtle destructive purchase is expensive experiences as a regular lifestyle. I'm not talking about occasional vacations or special celebrations. I'm talking about turning high entertainment spending into a life pattern. Expensive dinners several times a week, frequent shows and events, hobbies that cost thousands of dollars monthly, multiple luxury trips per year. It's important to understand that this category is more dangerous than the others because it comes disguised as investing in experiences. There's a popular cultural narrative that says, you can't take money to the grave, so spend on experiences. This seems wise on the surface, but ignores a fundamental reality. The quality of your experiences during retirement years depends directly on the amount of money you have available. If you spend $2,000 per month on expensive experiences from age 25 to 50, you may be compromising your ability to have quality experiences from age 65 to 85. I'll use an analogy. Imagine you have a piece of land and can choose plant trees that will bear delicious fruit for 50 years or eat all the seeds today. Expensive experiences as a lifestyle are like eating the seeds. I'm not advocating for a life without pleasure. I'm advocating for intelligence in the temporal distribution of your pleasures. A person who saves $2,000 per month from age 25 to 50 and invests at 7% per year will have approximately $1.6 million at age 50. This means they can stop working and spend $100,000 per year on experiences for the next 30 years. If they want, compare this to someone who spent the $2,000 monthly on experiences during the same period. At age 50, this person still needs to work and has little money for quality experiences. The irony is clear. Those who delay gratification have more total gratification. Those who seek immediate gratification have less total gratification. Now, let's talk about how these principles apply to the real life of the average American. According to Federal Reserve data, the median American family has only $65,000 in net worth at age 55. This is not the result of low salaries. It's the result of decades making exactly the 5 purchases I just described. I'll give you a concrete example. Imagine a couple that earns $80,000 annually combined. If they avoid these 5 categories of destructive purchases, they can easily save and invest $1,500 per month. In 30 years, at 7% per year, this results in approximately $1.8 million. The same couple making these 5 purchases regularly probably manages to save only $200 per month, resulting in $240,000 in 30 years. The difference is $1.6 million. That's what these 5 purchases cost over a lifetime. It's not a question of how much you earn. It's a question of how much you avoid spending on things that destroy your financial future. Let me be even more specific. If you're in your 30 seconds and have less than $50,000 invested, you're probably making at least 3 of these 5 destructive purchases. If you're in your 40 seconds and have less than $150,000 invested, you're definitely making these purchases. If you're in your 50 seconds and have less than $300,000 invested, these purchases have already seriously compromised your retirement. The good news is it's never too late to change. Even at age 50, avoiding these purchases for the next 15 years can mean the difference between working until you die and retiring with dignity. Now, I need to address something important: why these purchases are so tempting, even when you logically understand they're destructive. The answer lies in how our brains were programmed by evolution and how our society was structured by consumerism. For millions of years, humans lived in scarcity. When they found abundant resources, the correct survival strategy was to consume immediately. This programming is still active in our brains. When we see something we want, we feel a primitive urgency to get it now. Companies know this weakness and exploit it systematically through marketing. Additionally, our society has created a social signaling system based on consumption. You demonstrate success through what you own, not what you save. This creates constant social pressure to make exactly the purchases that harm your financial future. Understanding this dynamic is the first step to protecting yourself from it. Whenever you feel the urge to make one of the 5 destructive purchases, stop and ask, am I doing this because I need to, or because I'm being manipulated by primitive impulses and social pressure? In most cases, you'll discover it's the second option. Now, I'll share a practical system to avoid these 5 destructive purchases. Whenever you want to make a non-essential purchase above $500, wait 30 days. Write down what you want to buy and why. After 30 days, reevaluate whether it still makes sense. In 90% of cases, you'll discover the urge has passed and you no longer need the item. Before any significant purchase, calculate how much that money would be worth if invested for 30 years at 7% per year. A $40,000 car today represents $304,000 in 30 years. A house $100,000 more expensive represents $760,000 in 30 years. Always do this calculation before deciding. Ask yourself, if I don't make this purchase, what real and significant problem will this create in my life? If the answer is none, or I'll be less socially impressive, don't buy. Set up automatic transfers to investments before you have a chance to spend the money. If you never see the money, you don't miss it. Every end of year, add up how much you spent in each of the 5 destructive categories. Calculate how much that money would be worth if invested. This annual review helps you maintain perspective on your financial decisions. I'll show you exactly how avoiding these purchases can transform your retirement. Imagine 3 scenarios for a 30-year-old who earns $60,000 annually. In the first scenario, they make all 5 destructive purchases, manage to invest only $200 per month, and at age 65 have $240,000. They can withdraw $960 per month in retirement and depend on Social Security to survive. In the second scenario, they avoid 3 of the 5 purchases, manage to invest $800 per month, at age 65 have $960,000, and can withdraw $3,840 per month in retirement. They live comfortably without depending on the government. In the third scenario, they avoid all 5 purchases, manage to invest $1,400 per month, at age 65 have $1.68 million, and can withdraw $6,720 per month in retirement. They are financially independent. The difference between the first and third scenario is $5,760 per month during retirement. That's $69,000 additional annually for the rest of their life. More importantly, in the third scenario, the person can retire 10 or 15 years earlier if they want, because they don't need to wait for Social Security. It's not a prediction, it's an inevitable mathematical consequence of avoiding destructive purchases. Let me share an observation that may seem counterintuitive. People who avoid these 5 purchases don't feel like they're depriving themselves. They feel more abundant, not less. Why? Because real abundance isn't having many things. Real abundance is having many options. When you avoid destructive purchases and invest the difference, you're buying future options. Option to work less, option to change careers, option to live where you want, option to help your children, option to not worry about money. When you make destructive purchases, you're selling these future options for immediate gratification. It's a terrible trade, but our society promotes it as if it were smart. I'll use a final metaphor. Imagine you can choose between having 100 toys for 1 year or having 10 toys for 50 years. The 5 destructive purchases are like choosing the 100 toys for 1 year. Avoiding them is like choosing the 10 toys for 50 years. The first option seems more fun. The second option offers more total fun. There's something important I need to highlight about this system. The effects multiply in ways you may not immediately perceive. When you stop making these 5 destructive purchases, 3 things happen simultaneously. First, you stop actively losing money. Second, you start investing more money. Third, you develop discipline that applies to other areas of life. This third effect is often underestimated, but it's powerful. People who develop financial discipline often also improve in other areas: health, relationships, career. This happens because the ability to resist immediate gratification is a transferable skill. When you practice this skill with money, it gets stronger in all other areas of your life. The result is that you not only get richer, but also healthier, more productive, and more fulfilled overall. It's what I call the discipline multiplier effect. One specific change generates improvements in multiple areas. One of the biggest difficulties in avoiding these purchases is dealing with social pressure and people's questions. When you drive a used car while your colleagues drive new cars, some people will question your choices. When you wear simple clothes while others wear expensive brands, you may face judgment. When you live in a smaller house than you could afford, people will express unsolicited opinions. For cars, you can say, I prefer to invest in assets that appreciate rather than assets that depreciate. For clothes, I like quality, not logos. For houses, our house perfectly meets our needs. For electronics, it still works perfectly. For experiences, I'm saving for something important. But the truth is, you owe no explanation to anyone about your financial choices. The people who pressure you to spend more money are rarely the ones who will offer you money when you need it. Keep your financial goals to yourself. Let your results speak for themselves over time. If you've made it this far, you're probably wondering, when is the best time to start avoiding these purchases? The answer is simple: today. Doesn't matter if you're 25, 35, 45, or 55 years old. Doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. It doesn't matter how many financial mistakes you made in the past. What matters is what you do from now on. If you're 25, avoiding these purchases for the next 40 years can result in over $2 million additional in retirement. If you're 35, you can still accumulate over $1, $2 million additional. If you're 45, you can still accumulate over $600,000 additional. If you're 55, you can still accumulate over $250,000 additional. At any age, this difference is significant. At any age, it's worth starting. The biggest mistake people make is thinking, I've lost too much time, there's no point in starting anymore. This is false. The second best time to start is always now. The mathematics of time is still on your side, regardless of your age. Let me end with a reflection on the true nature of wealth. Over the last 40 years, I've observed thousands of people building and destroying fortunes. I've studied patterns that repeat in different countries, different cultures, different eras, and I learned something fundamental. Wealth is not what you own, wealth is what you avoid losing. The 5 purchases we discussed today are the most common ways ordinary people lose the opportunity to build extraordinary wealth. They're not the only ways, but they're the most systematic. They're the ones that affect practically all Americans every day for decades. Avoiding them is not a guarantee that you'll become rich, but continuing to make them is almost a guarantee that you won't. History is clear. People who build lasting wealth are those who develop the discipline to avoid destructive purchases, regardless of social pressure or their momentary impulses. They understand that each purchase is a choice between present gratification and future freedom. And consistently, over decades, they choose future freedom. It's not a matter of sacrifice, it's a matter of temporal perspective. When you understand that avoiding a destructive purchase today can represent thousands of additional dollars during retirement, the choice becomes obvious. When you understand that financial discipline is life discipline, the value goes far beyond money. When you understand that real abundance is having options, not things, your priorities reorganize naturally. True wealth is not in the objects you accumulate during life. It's in the tranquility of knowing you made smart decisions that protected and expanded your future options. It's in the freedom of not worrying about money during your final years of life. It's in the ability to help other people without compromising your own security. It's in the dignity of a retirement based on your own smart choices, not dependence on government programs or others' charity. If you look carefully, you'll see that this form of wealth is available to practically anyone who works and earns a decent salary. The difference between those who achieve this wealth and those who don't is not in luck, market timing, or extraordinary opportunities. It's in the daily discipline of avoiding 5 types of purchases that seem harmless but systematically destroy wealth building potential. Now you know these 5 purchases. Now you understand the mathematics behind them. Now you have the tools to avoid them. What you do with this knowledge will determine how you'll live the next 30 years of your life. The choice, as always, is yours. But remember, history is an excellent teacher, and it teaches us that those who ignore these patterns are destined to repeat them. Don't be another inadequate retirement statistic. Be an example of how smart decisions, repeated consistently over time, create extraordinary results. Your future self will thank you for the decisions you make starting today.